kick me! I'm already hurt!
I was lying on the cold marble floor, surrounded by laughter. My torn dress hung from my shoulder, my dignity scattered like shattered glass. All I could whisper was, "Please, don't kick me. I'm already hurt." And then, the doors opened. He walked in, and everything changed. I still remember the way the air felt that evening. Heavy, expensive, and full of people who didn't notice the world beyond their own reflections. I had spent all afternoon getting ready, carefully pressing my pale pink dress, the nicest thing I owned. It wasn't new, not even close, but I loved how it made me feel, like maybe, just for once, I belonged somewhere that sparkled. Ethan had told me to meet him at the Crescent Lounge, the kind of restaurant that made the word luxury sound ordinary. He said it was a surprise. I didn't know then how right he was, but not in the way I hoped. The moment I walked through the tall glass doors, I felt the shift in the room. Conversations paused just long enough for a few curious eyes to sweep over me, my simple dress, my small purse, my worn-out heels. Then came the whispers. The quiet, cruel kind that pretends to be laughter. I tried to smile through it, pretending not to notice. Maybe they weren't talking about me. Maybe I was just imagining it. I told the hostess I was waiting for my husband. She smiled politely but hesitated, like she wasn't sure I belonged there either. She offered to seat me at a small table near the corner, far away from the glittering crowd. I thanked her and sat down, smoothing my dress over my knees. I checked my phone. One new message from Ethan. Running late, just 15 minutes. I smiled at the screen. 15 minutes. I could wait 15 minutes. That's when they walked in. A group of rich women dressed in shimmering gowns, diamonds catching the soft light like tiny flashes of lightning. They carried themselves the way people do when they're used to being watched, admired, feared. Their laughter was loud, deliberate, and it filled every corner of the room. I tried not to stare. I just wanted to disappear into my little corner. But one of them, tall, blonde, wrapped in confidence and silk, noticed me. She leaned over to her friends and whispered something, and they all turned to look. At first, I smiled politely, hoping they'd smile back. Instead, she laughed. "Sweetheart," she said loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, "I think you're lost. The service entrance is in the back." Her friends burst out laughing. My throat tightened, but I stayed quiet. "I'm just waiting for someone," I said softly. "Oh?" She smirked. "Your date works here or washes the dishes?" Another round of laughter. Someone else added, "She's probably a charity case. Look at that dress." I could feel every eye in the restaurant turn toward me. My cheeks burned. I wanted to vanish. I stood to leave, but one of them stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "Not so fast," she sneered. Her perfume was strong, sweet, and suffocating. "You don't belong here, honey. People like you never do." She reached for my sleeve and tugged hard, the fabric tearing at the seam. The sound echoed like thunder in my ears. Gasps, laughter. I stumbled back, clutching the torn fabric against my chest. "Please," I whispered, my voice trembling, "don't kick me. I'm already hurt." But they didn't stop. Someone pushed my shoulder, and I fell, the marble floor cold against my skin. My palms stung, my heart raced, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The laughter around me grew louder, sharper. I looked up, tears blurring my vision, and that's when the crowd fell silent. The doors behind them swung open. Heavy footsteps echoed closer. I didn't need to look. Somehow, deep inside, I knew. Ethan had come back. The laughter died faster than it began. I could feel the shift before I even turned my head. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the polished floor, steady and unhurried, the kind of walk that carried authority without needing to announce it. For a second, no one spoke. Even the arrogant woman who had torn my sleeve froze, her smirk fading into confusion. I lifted my head, still on the floor, clutching the torn edge of my dress. And there he was, Ethan, my husband. His expression was unreadable, his jaw tense, his eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. He wasn't in his usual work clothes. Tonight he looked different. Sharp gray suit, polished shoes, no trace of the soft-spoken man who made me tea every morning. Every step he took felt deliberate, controlled, almost dangerous. The tall blonde woman who had mocked me first straightened her back, forcing a nervous smile. "Oh my God, Ethan! We didn't know you were—" She started, but he didn't even glance at her. He walked past her like she didn't exist, his focus locked entirely on me. The moment his eyes met mine, the walls I'd been holding up all night broke. I wanted to speak, to explain. But my voice was gone. My lips trembled, and tears slid silently down my cheeks. He knelt beside me without a word. The fabric of his suit brushed against my torn dress as he gently draped his jacket over my shoulders, covering me from the eyes still staring. "You're safe now," he said quietly. Just those 3 words, but they carried more strength than anything I'd ever heard. He reached for my hand, helping me to my feet. His grip was steady, grounding, and somehow that steadiness made me realize how violently the world had just tried to shake me. When he finally turned to face the others, the silence was suffocating. His tone was calm, but there was steel in it when he said, "Who touched my wife?" A few of the women gasped. One whispered, "Wife?" under her breath. The manager rushed forward, red-faced and trembling. "Sir, I didn't realize—" Ethan's gaze cut through him like glass. "You didn't realize? You let people assault a woman in your establishment while you watched." His voice didn't rise, but somehow it was more terrifying that way. "You humiliated someone who was sitting quietly, waiting for her husband. You laughed. You joined them." No one moved. No one dared to speak. The woman who had pushed me earlier tried to stutter out a defense, something about a misunderstanding, but Ethan silenced her with one look. He straightened, his hand still holding mine. "If this is how you treat strangers, you don't deserve the privilege of serving anyone in my company." "See, company?" the manager stammered, eyes wide. That's when it clicked for everyone. A few of them whispered his name. A few gasped. The realization spread like wildfire. Ethan wasn't an employee. He was the owner, the billionaire founder of the entire restaurant chain. The same people who had just called me a beggar were now pale, shaking, desperate to find an excuse. Ethan turned slightly, his expression unreadable. "You all just taught me something tonight," he said coldly. "You showed me what people become when they think no one powerful is watching." He called the head of security with a single motion of his hand. "Lock the doors. No one leaves until we review the footage." His tone was calm, but final, the kind of command that didn't need to be repeated. The women exchanged horrified glances, their pride melting into panic. One of them began to cry softly. The manager kept mumbling apologies, but Ethan ignored them all. He looked back at me, his eyes softening for the first time since he'd entered. "You don't owe anyone an explanation," he said. "Not anymore." And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about what they did to me. This was about what I had never known about him. My quiet, gentle husband, the man who used to walk me to work in the rain, wasn't just another employee trying to survive. He was a man with power, influence, and control over every person standing in that room, but he never used it before. Until now. The silence that filled that room could have cracked glass. Every eye darted between Ethan and the group of women who had just humiliated me minutes ago. I stood there trembling, still wrapped in his jacket, my fingers clutching the fabric like a lifeline. My heart was pounding, not from fear anymore, but from disbelief. For years, I had thought my husband was just a quiet, hard-working man who lived a simple life. But the man standing before me now, the authority in his voice, the composure in his eyes, was someone I didn't recognize. Ethan turned to the trembling manager first. "You're responsible for this place, aren't you?" His tone was even, almost polite, which somehow made it even more terrifying. The manager nodded quickly, sweat visible on his forehead. "Then tell me," Ethan continued, "why did you allow my wife to be assaulted, humiliated, and thrown to the floor in front of your staff and guests?" I didn't know she was your wife, sir," the manager stammered. Ethan's jaw tightened. "So if she weren't, that would make it acceptable?" He took a step closer, and the man's knees nearly buckled. You think a person's worth depends on who they're married to? Or how expensive their clothes are? His voice was calm, but every word landed like a blow. You're not just fired. You're finished. And before you try to apply anywhere else, remember, every major hotel in this city answers to me. The color drained from the man's face. Security guards moved quietly toward him, escorting him away. The women who had mocked me stood frozen in a row, their designer smiles gone, replaced by panic. One of them, the tall blonde who had torn my dress, tried to regain her voice. "Ethan, we didn't know. We were just joking." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, like someone studying a creature they didn't quite understand. "Joking?" he repeated slowly. "You tore a woman's clothes, pushed her to the ground, and laughed while she cried. Tell me, is that your idea of humor?" Her lips trembled. "It was a mistake, please." "No," he interrupted. "It was a revelation." He motioned to one of the security staff. "Bring me the footage from the lobby cameras." Within seconds, the restaurant's large digital display flickered to life. The entire room watched in silence as the recording replayed. The laughter, the insults, the moment my sleeve tore, the way I fell and whispered, "Please, don't kick me." There was no escape from it now. Ethan didn't even look away. "This," he said coldly, "is how the people in this room treated a guest. This is what arrogance looks like when it thinks it can hide behind money." The women covered their faces in shame. One began to sob quietly. Another whispered, "Please, we'll do anything." "Just don't ruin us." Ethan exhaled slowly, his tone colder now. "Ruin you?" he said. "You did that yourselves. You'll be banned from every one of my properties, effective immediately." He turned to the restaurant staff. "And the rest of you, let this be a lesson. Your job is not to serve the rich. Your job is to serve with respect." The staff nodded nervously. I stood silently beside him, still trying to process everything. I wanted to ask him why he never told me, why he kept his wealth a secret, why the man I loved had hidden an entire empire behind a gentle smile. But all I could do was watch as he handled every second with unshakable calm. When he finally turned back to me, the power in his voice melted into something softer. "You don't have to fear them anymore," he said quietly. "Not while I'm here." My throat tightened as I whispered, "You own this place?" He met my eyes, his expression gentle but steady. "I own a lot more than this," he said, "but nothing means more to me than you." And in that moment, I realized I wasn't standing next to the man I thought I knew. I was standing next to the man everyone else in that room now feared. The man who had just shown the world that love doesn't make you weak. It gives you power that no money ever could. For a long moment, I couldn't find words. My mind was spinning, trying to catch up with everything that had just happened. I stood there, surrounded by stunned faces, and all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing. Ethan's jacket still hung loosely around my shoulders, carrying his warmth and his silence. He hadn't told me who he really was, not once in all these years. And now, in the middle of that glittering chaos, I finally understood why everyone looked at him the way they did, like he wasn't just a man, but a force. When the crowd began to scatter, Ethan took my hand gently and led me to a quieter corner. His touch was firm but careful, as though I might shatter if he wasn't gentle enough. "I'm sorry you had to see this side of me," he said softly. "I never wanted the world I come from to touch you." I stared at him, still trembling. "You lied to me," I whispered. "All this time, you let me think you were just a regular man." He didn't flinch. "I never lied, Madeline. I just didn't tell you everything. I wanted to know what it felt like to be loved for who I am, not for what I have. I wanted to build something real, not with a woman who'd fall for a name or a number, but someone who'd stay when life wasn't glamorous." I didn't know what to say. My eyes burned as tears began to blur my vision again, but this time they weren't from humiliation. They were from the collision of anger, confusion, and something softer. Something that still loved him despite the storm. "You didn't have to test me to know that," I said, my voice breaking. "You could have just trusted me." He nodded, his eyes heavy with guilt. "You're right. And I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting what we had, but I realize now I was also hiding from it. When I saw you on that floor, I didn't see the woman I was protecting. I saw the woman I'd failed." His words broke something inside me and healed something else at the same time. The sincerity in his eyes was undeniable. The same man who commanded a room with his presence was now standing before me, stripped of power, stripped of pride. Just a husband, desperate to make things right. I took a shaky breath. "I didn't marry your money, Ethan. I married your heart, and tonight, even after everything, that's still what I see." He looked at me for a long time, then took my hands in his. "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that," he said, his voice low, almost trembling. "You reminded me that the world I built means nothing if I can't protect the person who made it worth living in." Around us, the whispers had shifted. People weren't laughing anymore. They were watching, silently, curiously, almost respectfully. Word had spread quickly. Phones were recording, messages were being sent. The story was already traveling far beyond those golden walls. But for once, I didn't care. Let them see. Let the world see the truth. Not the money, not the power, but the strength that comes from standing tall when you're broken. Later that night, as we left the restaurant hand in hand, the same security guards who had looked past me before now bowed their heads in respect. The marble floor that had been cold against my skin earlier now gleamed under the soft lights, and for the first time in hours, I could breathe again. When we stepped outside, the night air wrapped around us like a quiet apology. Ethan stopped by the car and looked at me with a faint, tired smile. "I'll never let anyone make you feel small again," he said. I looked up at him, this man I loved, this man I was still learning to understand, and said softly, "You don't have to. I'm done feeling small, and for the first time in my life, I truly meant it." It's strange how time softens even the sharpest memories. A month passed, but that night still lingered like a scar, visible only when the light hit it a certain way. I thought the world would forget, but it didn't. The video of my humiliation and what happened after spread faster than either of us expected. People called it poetic justice, a lesson in humility, a story about karma finding its way home. But to me, it was just a reminder that grace can be louder than revenge. Ethan had been different since that night, not in the way people change when they're angry or ashamed, but in the quiet way someone changes when they've been reminded what truly matters. He canceled meetings, turned down interviews, and instead spent his mornings sitting with me over coffee. No suits, no business calls, just us. One morning he said, "I've built empires, Madeline. But they mean nothing if they don't make life better for people like you, people like us." And that's how the foundation started. The Hartwell Initiative, he called it, named after the street where we first met. A program to help women who had been humiliated, abandoned, or underestimated. Women who'd been told they didn't belong. I became its first director, though I never felt like one. I was still learning to stand in a world that once tried to crush me. But every time I walked into that office and saw those women smiling, I realized something powerful. The same pain that once broke me was now helping others rebuild. A few weeks later, I returned to that same restaurant, the Crescent Lounge. This time, not as a trembling guest, but as a woman who had found her voice. The staff greeted me differently now, with respect, with warmth. The lobby had changed too. On one of the walls hung a small plaque, silver and simple, engraved with a line that Ethan had written, "Kindness is not weakness. It's power in silence." Standing there, reading those words, I felt a strange calm. I had cried enough tears to fill an ocean, but in that moment, all I felt was peace. The pain wasn't gone. It had just evolved into something stronger. As I turned to leave, I noticed someone standing by the entrance. It was her, The tall blonde woman who had torn my dress that night, her posture was different now. Gone was the arrogance, the careless confidence. She looked smaller, humbled. She hesitated before walking toward me, her eyes red, her voice low. "Madeline," she said softly, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." For a moment I didn't know what to say. A part of me wanted to walk away, to leave her in the discomfort she'd earned. But another part, the part that still remembered what it felt like to cry on that cold floor, couldn't. I took a breath and said, "I won't forget what you did, but I hope you never make someone else feel like that again." Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded, whispering, "I won't." Then she walked away. I stood there for a long time after she left, staring out at the city lights flickering through the glass. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but it was freeing. I realized I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to make anyone pay. The fact that I was still standing, still breathing, still me, was the greatest victory of all. Later that evening, Ethan met me outside. He wrapped an arm around me and asked, "You okay?" I smiled. "More than okay." And I meant it, because sometimes redemption doesn't come from punishing others. It comes from proving to yourself that they never had the power to destroy you. They say time changes people, but I think it simply reveals who they really are. In the weeks that followed, life felt slower, softer, like the world was finally catching its breath after the storm. The noise faded, the gossip burned out, and what remained was a quiet truth I carried in my heart. No one can take away your dignity unless you hand it to them. I had learned that the hard way. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit on the balcony with a cup of tea, watching the city lights shimmer in the distance. Ethan would join me, no longer the mysterious man hiding behind a secret life, but just my husband, the man who had chosen love over pride. He'd slip his hand into mine, and for a while, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Silence had its own language now, one that spoke of forgiveness, strength, and the kind of peace that comes after surviving something meant to break you. One evening, I looked at him and said, "You know, if that night never happened, I might still believe I was small." He turned to me, his brow furrowed gently. "You were never small, Madeline," he said. "The world just tried to convince you you were." That sentence stayed with me. It became the heartbeat of everything I did afterward, every speech, every outreach, every story I told through our foundation. The Hartwell Initiative had grown beyond anything we'd imagined. Women from every walk of life came forward, sharing stories that mirrored mine, of being dismissed, judged, humiliated. And together, we rebuilt not just their confidence, but their faith that kindness still has a place in the world. We hosted workshops, mentorship programs, and community dinners where everyone had a seat at the table. And every time I saw someone walk through those doors with their head held a little higher than before, I remembered the girl I once was. The one who had whispered, "Please don't kick me, I'm already hurt." Now I whisper something different to myself. I'm not hurt anymore. I'm healed. Sometimes, when people recognize me from that viral video, they ask if I regret it. The humiliation, the tears, the public shame. I always smile and say, "No," because that moment didn't define my weakness. It revealed my strength. If that night had never happened, I might never have found the voice I have now, the courage to speak for others who can't. Standing on that same balcony one night, Ethan turned to me and asked quietly, "Would you change anything if you could?" I looked at him for a long moment, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "No," I said, "because every cruel word, every shove, every tear led me here, to this peace, to this purpose." He smiled then, a soft, proud smile, and kissed my forehead. "You're extraordinary," he whispered. "Maybe I am, not because I'm wealthy now or because people finally treat me with respect, but because I learned that true power doesn't come from money, revenge, or status. It comes from surviving with your heart still intact. It comes from walking away with your kindness unbroken. So if someone ever makes you feel small, remember this: your worth isn't determined by their blindness. Keep your dignity, keep your softness. The world will eventually see you for who you are, and those who once laughed will be the ones silenced by your strength. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that pain doesn't last forever. Hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with me, because the quietest souls often have the loudest stories to tell. And this was mine. If someone ever tried to humiliate you, remember, their cruelty says more about them than it ever will about you. Stay kind, stay strong, and never forget your worth. If this story touched your heart, hit like, share it with someone who needs courage today, and subscribe for more stories that prove quiet souls have the loudest strength.